Today we're going to look at a conversation that Christ had with the Jews in John chapter 8, verse 48 to 59. But before then, let us have a think about how Christ came and was God in human flesh. So let's think about the scene in Galilee, in Nazareth, in Jerusalem. The Jews are seeing someone making proclamations about who he is. Their history that had many that come to lead rebellion against the Romans. But this man had come. He had people following him, but he was not leading a rebellion against the Romans. But instead, what he spoke to them was different. He was making proclamations of what he was and what he was bringing to the world. He told them he is the light of the world, and he who follows him will not walk in darkness, but have life. If you were among them, would you believe him? And what if that same man already proclaimed to them, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall not hunger, and he who believes in me shall not thirst. They'll be wondering, who is this man? And what if that man told them, if you are thirsty, come unto me and drink, and he who believes in me, as the scripture says, from his innermost beings will flow rivers of living water. And these utterances he made to different crowds in the temple, sitting, teaching them. And many would have wondered who he was. Some will conclude, as many did, this man is deluded. Or some would have said, maybe this man is God. And this was the issue between the scribes and the Pharisees as Jesus was having the discussion with them in John chapter 8. The background to this discussion is that Jesus is in the temple and he had just refused to condemn the woman the scribes and Pharisees brought to him to ask whether she should be stoned after she was caught in adultery by saying to them, he who is without sin among you, let him throw the first stone. And after her accusers had left her, in John chapter 8, from verse 1 to 11, the record says, Christ rose up and told her, neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on, sin no more. So here we see the Jewish leaders are definitely not happy with Christ because of what he's teaching and the way he's teaching. And he was somewhat different to them. So in verse 12 of John chapter 8, Christ again makes a declaration and he says to them, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. So the background is he has spoken to the Jews, the Pharisees, and they've all left. And then he's now making a proclamation of who he was. And then the Pharisees then say to him, you are bearing witness about yourself. Your testimony is not true. But Jesus answered, even if I do bear witness about myself, my testimony is true. For I know where I came from, I know where I'm going, but you do not know where I come from and where I'm going. You judge according to the flesh. I judge no one, but even if I do judge, my judgment is true. For it is not I alone who judge, but I and the Father who sent me. So he's making this declaration to them because they had convicted the woman, but Christ did not condemn him. And this is when Christ has this discussion with them, and they go back and forth, and there's a big argument around him. And this is what the latter end of this chapter talks about. But for this morning, we'll focus on the statements recorded in chapter 48 to 59 of John chapter 8. Here we see the argument with the Pharisees increasing. And the Pharisees begin to call Jesus names. They could not refute his statement he made about being the light of the world. He made statement that they are following their father, the devil, and they want to kill him. And verse 8 reads a response from the Jews. And the Jews answered, are we not right in saying that you are a Samaritan and you have a demon? And this was like a way for them to push back at Christ because they couldn't respond in the way he was speaking. So they went after him. To call him a Samaritan was a great reproach, as one who was a Jew could say to another, because Samaritans were half Jewish, because they intermarried with pagan Gentiles during the captivity. And so this was something that to them looked like they were attacking him. And then they called that he had a demon. And we see the trend in the Gospels. This is a common abuse that the Jews gave unto Christ. And we have recorded instances of when he taught and they marveled, like in John chapter 7, verse 19 to 20, when he taught in the temple and they marveled that he knew so much. Verse 19 tells us, and Christ told them, did Moses not give you the law, yet none of you keeps the law? Why do you seek me to kill me? And the people answered and said, you have a demon who is seeking to kill you. He knew their intentions, but to retort back to him, they now accuse him that he had a demon. In John chapter 10, verse 19 to 20, when Jesus makes that declaration that he is the good shepherd, also they retort to him. Verse 19 reads, therefore there was a division again among the Jews because of these sayings. And many of them said, he has a demon and is mad. Why do you listen to him? And these instances account, people were making these accusations against him, but there were still crowds following him because of what he taught and because of the healing he was doing unto many. And in Matthew chapter 12, verse 22 to 24, we see that Christ heals a man possessed with a demon who was blind and mute. And then once again, they cast that aspersion and call that he has a demon. Verse 22 reads, then one was brought to him who was demon possessed, blind and mute, and he healed him so that the blind and the mute man spoke and saw. And all the multitude were amazed and said, could this be the son of David? Now, when the Pharisees heard it, they said, this fellow does not cast out demons except by Beelzebub, the ruler of demons. So we see that they had this stock in trade with them that they were always using to accuse Christ, that he has a demon, when they couldn't refute what he said. But we read down the discussion again. Christ answers them in 14 chapter verse 49 to 53 and says, I do not have a demon, but I honor my Father, and you dishonor me. Yet I do not seek my own glory, but there is one who seeks it, and he is the judge. Truly I say to you, if anyone keeps my word, he will never see death. Here again, he makes another declaration that anyone who keeps his word, he will never see death. And this, the Jews now go against him more. The Jews said to him, now we know that you have a demon. Abraham died as did the prophets, yet you say, if anyone keeps my word, he will never test it. Are you greater than our father Abraham who died and the prophets? Or who do you make yourself out to be? So we see what he says here is what the writer of Hebrew records in Hebrew chapter 2, verse 9, that says, but Christ Jesus, we see, who was made a little lower than the angels, for the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, that he, by the grace of God, might test death for everyone. He was saying this because he knew what death he was going to die. And he was going to die so that all of us might not test that death. But they were looking at him and looking at, our father Abraham was good, and he died. The prophets were good, and he died. Who are you that is saying, if anybody hears my word, he's not going to die? But he did not appreciate or understand what he was saying. And Jesus then responds to them in 54 to 55, saying about how he glorifies only his Father and nothing else. And Jesus answered them, if I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. It is my Father who glorifies me, of whom you say he is our God. But you have not known him, but I know him. If I were to say to you that I do not know him, I'll be a liar like you. But I do know him and keep his word. Here, Jesus is not seeking his own glory before the Pharisees, but seeking to glorify the Father. Then we come up to where we have this set of arguments again. And they retort unto him in verse 56 to 57. Your father Abraham, and Christ retorted unto them, your father Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day. He saw it and was glad. So the Jews said to him, you are not yet 50, and yet you've seen Abraham. So they that perplexed, that confused. This man is talking about not seeing death. He's now talking about Abraham. Because Abraham, God told Abraham that through him, through his seed, all the world will be blessed. And that is what Christ was referring to. And they're now casting, looking at him and saying, look at this young man. You're not even up to 50. And you're saying, you say Abraham. And they might have looked at it as he's not even old, and he's saying he's seen Abraham. And how many years has Abraham died? So looking at them, now, who is this? Looking down on him. But then what Christ was referring to is that he is not just a man, but he had the embodiment of the deity before God. And this is where we come to the crux of what this discussion is about. In John chapter 8, verse 58 to 59, Christ makes one of the declarations that is that I am. But this is one that encapsulates everything about why he came and who he is. Verse 58 said, Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. So they picked up the stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. Christ told them, before Abraham was, I am. And for us to appreciate the magnitude of that statement, he did not say, before Abraham was, I was. He said, before Abraham was, I am. He had told them that he was the light of the world. He had told them that he had come as a good shepherd. And many had seen the wonders he had done. So they would have just equated him as a prophet. They would have equated him as someone that Isaiah prophesied about. But they were thinking in the physical. But that was not what Christ was. Christ was speaking of who he is, his deity and what he is. And for us to appreciate the magnitude of that declaration that Christ made, let's go to Exodus and see what happened when God called Moses in the burning bush. In Exodus chapter 3, verse 13 to 14, God has instructed Moses to go and tell the Israelites that he is going to call them out from Egypt. And Moses returned back to God, saying, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me. And they ask me, what is his name? Then what shall I tell them? And verse 14 says, God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you say to the Israelites. I am sent me to you. So let's think about that declaration that Christ made to the Jews in the temple. God told Moses, I am sent me to you. And Christ told the children of the Jews that were there standing before him, before Abraham was, I am. The I am statement of Christ in this instance encapsulates who he was. Because he was not just a man that was come to preach. Obviously, we knew that in the human figure, Christ was born in Bethlehem. But what he said was to emphasize the preeminence of what he is, of who he is, that he is the Son of God. So he was telling the Jews, Abraham was glad when he saw the glory that was coming, that was going to come to redeem the world. But even before Abraham existed, I existed. And this showed who he was. And we know that the scripture records for us that God created the world. And he created the universe. And because he created the universe, there is no time with regards to him. He's timeless. And because Christ is the Son of God and was with him, he is also of that nature. The preeminence, the creator, the one who sets everything in motion. And that is what Christ was trying to tell them here. Jesus was telling them that he is the life and the representation of the Godhead manifested unto earth. This was an astounding statement. Because if we look at all the declarations that Christ made, he talked about how he was shepherding them. He talked about how he was going to be the way, the truth. But this is a declaration that equates him with God. And this is a declaration that the Jews then sought to stone him with, because they saw that he was saying he was God. And we have to appreciate that I am who God is. The statement is a declaration that Christ was timeless. He is the creator. And there was never a time when he came into being. And there never will be a time when he is not in being. So you can imagine the anger and wanting to stone him for the thought he equated himself to God, not knowing that he was actually the true manifestation of God to man, who was to bear the sin of mankind. We, reading this thousands of years later, can believe and have that faith. But this was an astounding declaration to people in Palestine at that time. They saw someone who had come to feed them, heal them. Yes, many believed he was the messenger of God. And some would have thought he was just like a prophet. Like when he asked his disciples, who the men say I am? And they said, some think you're Elijah. Some think you're one of the prophets. But when he asked his disciples, who do you say I am? That's when Peter replied that he is the Son of God. So the cardinal concept of the Redeemer being the Son of God is what, even though the disciples knew, they could not grasp it well. Because when we remember when he had resurrected and commissioned them, some among the disciples always even wanted him and asked, when are you going to restore the kingdom? Because they were thinking in the physical. They were thinking about what he was doing to them. But Christ came so that we, even as far as thousands of years after, can become beneficiaries of this call to redemption. And his deity was what he was trying to tell the Jews in John chapter 8. Because he was discussing with them, telling them, even though you believe that your father is Abraham, you are not doing the deeds of Abraham, but you are doing the deeds of the devil. But even Abraham that you are not even following, I was before him. That was a response of the Jews then. If we take this story down to us now, what is the response that we have to what Christ is? For we see in Jesus not only a man who came and lived and died, we see in him the timeless God, who was the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. We see in Jesus the eternal God, who shows himself to man for the purpose of saving man from sin and the consequences of the separation from God. This was a claim of deity that Christ had made to the Jews. And it was a claim of deity that shook them, because they were in such unbelief that they wanted to stone him. That claim demanded a response from the Jews. And their response was to say he was a Samaritan. He had a demon, and they picked up stones to stone him. So what of us today? Who do we believe Christ is? And what is our response to this Christ? Are we accepting him? Are we rejecting him? Or do we have unbelief? Or do we accept him in some circumstances, and in some we don't listen to his word? Or do we only accept him on a particular day and focus on him, and all the other days we focus on ourselves? He told the Jews before Abraham was, I am. The I am of God implies that he is what he is. He is Christ the Redeemer. He was the rock that Moses struck. And he was the Christ that showed himself in the final days. The Jews could not fathom what he was. But even today, many cannot fathom who he is. The glory of God and the purpose of God was that Christ should come and be manifest and suffer for us. And then he ascends back into heaven. That timeless nature that God had agreed that his son should come demands a response from us. Not a response of unbelief or a partial acceptance or a rejection, but a response of total acceptance. Even when we think that the world is not fair to us, let us look at the I am who God sent, because he bore our iniquities and he can attest and join with us in our failings, because he says that we should come unto him, all you who labor and are heavy burdened, and he will give us rest. He says he's the door. He says he's the light. So let us focus our lives on the I am. Because if we focus on any other thing, it will not make any meaning. Because it is only Christ that deserves all our attention. Because he is the I am. Thank you.